Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. I don't know about you guys listening. I'm increasingly noticing that almost every tech news site is filled with stories about blockchain, cryptocurrency stories, or startup ICOs. Sure, usual suspects, Mashable and the Next Web and co. might have guides, but the average non-techie is just hearing white noise. But we all need to brace ourselves for this technological change. So when I heard that Kate Hiscox is not only the CEO of Venzee, about to embark on a blockchain product launch today, but she's also a self-confessed blockchain geek, it seemed that the stars were aligned and I had to get her on the show. So buckle up and hold on tight, because I want to beam your ears all the way to Vancouver in Canada so we can speak with Kate Hiscox, the CEO of Venzee, about their blockchain product launch, but also to demystify that world of blockchain. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure, absolutely. Firstly, thank you for having me. My name is Kate Hiscox. I'm the founder and CEO at Venzee. I've worked in e-commerce and supply chain management for about 18 years now. So the $23 trillion retail industry is one that I know very, very well. Venzee is my sixth company at this point. I always say that makes me sound crazy or old and crazy, a combination of the two. And Venzee came about, we built this platform as a result of my own experiences. Two of the companies that I built and sold were online stores. So I went through the challenges firsthand of very legacy processes within retail still around the way that suppliers update retailers on new products and subsequent changes like inventory and so on. So I haven't experienced it myself. First startup in 2004. It was there that my inbox was filled on a daily basis by spreadsheets from my suppliers, and it was just impossible to keep the website up to date, impossible to add more brands. So in terms of growth for an online store, that was tough. But we executed on everything we needed to do, sold that store in 2006, came back and did another one in 2013, almost 10 years after the first, and I was like, wait, what? Nothing's changed. Excel's 30 years old. How can this still be the primary method for 90% of the industry to exchange data? So at that point, the wheels started turning, and we sold that company pretty quickly towards the end of 2013, and then started putting the team together in 2014, which is Venzee today.
Don't get me started on the old Excel 30-year-old thing. I mean, why are we still so heavily reliant on that, you know?
It's so interesting. We talk a lot about interoperable data, and what that means is when you've got system A and system B, they're not compatible, right? So You've got to have middleware like Venzee to enrich that data and make it compatible so systems can talk to each other. So it's in retail today that relies more and more on online data, with spreadsheets still being used. Is it gets downloaded from one system, emailed to the other guy, and adapted and uploaded there. Again, that's the case in 90% of the industry, so it just delays revenue. It's really the number one challenge at this point. But, for, as you say, 30-year technology, this is a more than 20-year problem. And so there was a huge opportunity for us to put a platform together that sits in between suppliers and retailers so that data flows frictionless, enriched, and gets product information out. It needs to go very quickly. And AI plays a big part of that. So to your point, again, Excel's been used for so long, while we've had technology slowly catch up to be able to fulfill that role and automate that process, of which AI was a real key part for us.
Absolutely. And you are indeed a self-confessed blockchain geek, I've been reading.
I started to really get an interest. I'm a software engineer in a previous life, and really I've never lost that passion for technology, and I'm always thinking about how technology can address challenges, especially in my industry. But I really started playing around with Bitcoin in late 2012, 2013, and so that was sort of when I was first introduced to crypto. And then last year we started looking at how's blockchain going to affect, how will the technology affect supply chain, what are the opportunities there for Venzee. And we quickly realized that the technology that we built for Venzee over the last 4 years that provides interoperable data for this very large demanding industry, the retail industry, that technology is very badly needed. It lends itself incredibly well to blockchain, in fact. So because maybe you have a blockchain network here that's, as you know, decentralized database. You're going to have systems here that don't talk to it or just not compatible with smart contracts and so on. So you still need that data transformation piece to make sure everything talks to each other. So we said, wow, that's the answer. We've gotten really good at this technology. It will lend itself perfectly to that business as well.
I mean, there's so many problems that we've addressed already in just a few minutes, of us talking here. But I always think as well that outside of our tech circles that we both frequent, I think that everyone gets that blockchain is that big game changer. But despite reading those many online guides on sites such as Mashable or the Next Web, they still walk away thinking, I don't get it, but I want to get it. So if we do have people listening that feel that way, I mean, this could be a chance for us both to put this one to bed once and for all. So could I ask you to give a brief overview of what blockchain is and why it's so much more important than just another buzzword?
No, absolutely. So it's blockchain networks are databases, right? But versus a traditional database that perhaps is stored on a single server, it's a single version. A blockchain network or database, a decentralized database, is made up of many servers, if you want to call it that, many systems with many versions, copies of that database spread across them. So with a traditional database, you've got one version. With a blockchain database, you've got maybe 200 or 200,000. And so the way that blockchain works in terms of an update, it's based on consensus. So again, if you've got 200 systems with the same copy of the database and then 101 get updated with a certain piece of information, then that is considered as truth. That's fact as far as the most relevant or current update for that particular piece of information. So by nature of its architecture and the fact that you don't have one single version, it's not possible to update, it's not possible to delete. So it provides actually a higher level of security in some ways, but just by the fact that it's impossible to go in and change and manipulate without consensus. So when you look at its application in fintech, in supply chain, in medical records, even with land titles, right, with countries around the world that perhaps are not governed. It's tongue-in-cheek about the UK because we have our challenges ourselves. But perhaps they have the most ethical of governments. In other country, they see their land titles disappear, different things like that. So having an immutable record of certain events and transactions happening, it brings all kinds of opportunities and possibilities. So I do believe it is the second coming of the internet. It's when we say that, you and I will remember how excited we all were in 93, 95. Yeah. It really brings that kind of change. And I know sat here in Vancouver, and in Toronto, where I'm flying to today, it's all we talk about, both in tech and investment as well. A lot of money is being raised for this, both on the traditional VC side now as well, in the public markets, and as well as the ICOs, as we know.
Absolutely. Which brings us nice and neatly up to Venzee, which is your leading retail and supply chain SaaS platform. But you've also today announced the launch of Mesh, which I believe is the first middleware solution that enables businesses to easily connect everyday apps and also enterprise solutions with blockchain networks. I mean, can you expand on this? It seems an incredibly exciting day for you guys.
Yeah, it's so to that, as I say, when we looked at where Venzee could really fit, what the blockchain strategy will be, we very quickly realized that this technology we've developed over the last 4 years for Venzee that sits in between suppliers and retailers to create interoperable data and let data flow between systems, compatible, enriched, and so on. We realized that technology would lend itself very well to the blockchain space as well. Because whether you're a Citibank or a Nike or whomever, companies, as they deploy blockchain strategies, they've got existing systems that they need to connect. And then if you're dealing with, we talk a lot about the movement of data and data structure, which means whatever format, in the destination, what format of that data that is. So if you think about a smart contract, and if it is a real estate transaction, for example, there's certain information that the smart contract needs to be able to execute. A smart contract is written in a programming language that differs across different blockchain networks as well. But data is data, right? So you've got a traditional and existing enterprise solution or an everyday app on this side. It needs to connect to blockchain, needs to send data through in the right format that we transform in midair, per se, and then that gets written to the blockchain network on the end in the format it needs to be, which we use the term a lot in terms of smart contracts, but that's exactly that. So system here can speak to smart contract there, populate it with the data that's required.
Fantastic. Now, I also read a great quote from you recently where you said blockchain is poised to be the most disruptive force in business for absolute generations because it establishes a new level of trust, accountability and transparency in any kind of electronic transaction. I mean, can you tell me more about the reasons why you think it will be a disruptive force, to understand the differences between those old worlds and that new, exciting digital landscape that we've alluded to?
I think blockchain keeps people honest, right? And that's the inherent sort of power of it. So you've got, as we just touched on before, if you've got government around the world that don't always play well and fair, and land titles disappear, that kind of thing. It keeps people honest. The in supply chain, we talk a lot about. Well, we had a scandal actually in the UK a few recent weeks back. One of the biggest providers of or suppliers of chicken, right? So all the major grocery stores in the UK were not quite so truthful about sell-by dates and so on. And that this kind of thing happens all the time. So being able to have, if you are, a global brand with a lot of influence that can say, look, I need to see the activity of my supply chain. I want to see what they're doing so I can get in front of problems like that, make business critical decisions, just have insight into things as they go wrong. That lends itself a lot. It just makes for a more truthful, efficient supply chain in our industry. So, but that's being able to hold companies and people accountable through transactions handled through blockchain. I mean, it just brings, again, all kinds of possibilities.
So does that mean that we can finally wave goodbye to those 10-year-old spreadsheets, which are incredibly labour intensive to manage and also eat into the margins? How long until we can say goodbye to those, do you think?
We've gotten very good at what we do. We've taken, our first major global retailer, in fact, live. They're just the first of many in terms of being able to say, look, we used to have you fill out a giant spreadsheet to send us your new products and updates. Now go automate it through a platform like Venzee. So Venzee, again, for a supplier manufacturer, they moved from building all kinds of different spreadsheets every day for all of their various supply sales channels and retailers, just to very easily dumping their data into our platform. And then Venzee takes care of automatically turning it into the requirements of a Walmart or a Target or a Marks and Spencer, and automatically disseminates that information to where it needs to go. So again, to your point, very labor-intensive, hard delays everything. And with e-commerce, we need real-time data and we need error-free data. That's another piece that spreadsheets doesn't do. It doesn't say, hey, Neil, wait, you didn't fill out this column, or that's wrong. And so then you have back and forth as well. So it's really about speed. It's about real-time data and error-free data, which is where we come into play. So to answer your question, we have the tool, we have the platform. So hopefully soon. That's all we've always said, hashtag no more spreadsheets. Hopefully that'll become a reality one day.
Oh, I hope so. Can you also tell me more about how the mesh framework compromises of 3 distinct layers, I believe?
Sure. So we have, in terms of workflow, so a developer can come and connect again, an app or an enterprise solution, or many of them, in fact, and just bring data in as is from those solutions into a staging layer on mesh where that data is validated, it's merged together. And then the next step to that is that the developer would have chosen either a smart contract from our own library or built their own, generated their own kind of, if you imagine it a little like a form, and then they'll populate that form with the data. There's also advanced functions on our tool that'll do things like check for errors, it'll do automatic data enrichment, this kind of thing. But it's all about filling out that smart contract until it's all set, it's ready to go. And at that point, then it's executed, it's moved to the deployment stage, the third stage. So you've literally got staging, transformation, and deployment. And then at that point, it would be pushed off. It will be written to the destination blockchain network. And mesh will plays nicely between blockchain networks as well. So even if you're pulling data from this network to go to another one, mesh will work well for that too. So it's really targeted at developers who need to, whether as part of their own company or on behalf of their clients, who need to get a blockchain strategy out there quickly. So we call mesh, the shorter path to blockchain power. It's a don't DIY API through us and get that data moving quickly to where it needs to go. Because blockchain is immutable and that you can't go, oh, wait, I put something there I didn't mean to, let me go get rid of it. It's really important to make sure that maybe sensitive data or incorrect data is stopped right before it gets there, because you can't call someone and say, can you, or go back and overwrite. So we have the final stage of mesh before deployment to a blockchain network. We have what we call immutable fail-safes. So developers are able to set up, look for behavior, look for characteristics in data they're sending. Does that look like a bank account number? Does that look like a social security number? And put these fail-safes in place that would grab and strip that data out to make sure that the sensitive or incorrect data is not sent by mistake, because nobody wants to be, we say you don't want to be the IT guy on a Friday night and you hit the button and 10,000 social security numbers have gone to the Ethereum network. Who knows, right? But that's a real problem. So immutability brings real benefits, but with that, we've now got to have this challenge. We've really got to make sure what we write to blockchain is what we intended.
Yeah, I've been that IT guy on a Friday night when someone walks up to my desk. But thankfully it's a distant memory now. But I suppose the key to any of this technology is adoption. So, I mean, how difficult do you envision it will be to convince e-commerce vendors and retailers? And do you think the industry is ready to embrace this level of technological change?
So with Mesh, while Venzee focuses on retail and supply chain, Mesh is being marketed to really any industry. It looks like even some of our first adopters will be in mobile payments and oil and gas, which is different industries from where we play right now with Venzee. We're seeing a lot of movement within fintech, within medical, within supply chain, of especially larger brands that are looking to deploy blockchain strategy. But to your point, adoption, is always contingent on how much effort has to be made by your customers. So when you can, Mesh is an API-driven framework, right? Which is you'll know if you've got a robust, very well documented, well coverage with a lot of coverage and API in terms of getting data in and out, then that makes adoption that much easier. So if you've got a low barrier to entry for customers coming on that can again, using Mesh coming in through API, exiting through API in terms of being able to plug into a blockchain network, that's considerably easier than having to build out that connectivity and that data transformation from scratch. So I think, we're going to be dealing with a couple of things. We've got obviously a lot of excitement, a lot of interest in blockchain. A lot of people are now getting their heads around what the possibilities are, but blockchain itself is technology, is also in its infancy. And it needs to address some of its scalability issues and so on. But I think 2018 is going to be very, very interesting. We release our public beta in the first half of next year for Mesh. We're in closed testing right now. And as that, each week, we see more and more news coming out of different companies deploying blockchain strategies. And, we're all very grateful to IBM, who are making huge strides in this area, that are building out a lot of blockchain networks themselves, not so much the data transformation that Mesh does, but the blockchain networks. And they're really out there as educators, I think, at this point. And, you can sort of take my word for it in terms of how much of a game changer blockchain will be. But when you see companies like IBM, who are making some of the biggest commitments to new technology that they have in 20 or 30 years, I mean, they know their stuff, and they're definitely leading the charge on that blockchain education and adoption.
Presumably as well, in this age of disrupt or be disrupted and the digital transformation racing ahead, it's businesses that don't adopt and make it easier for their customers to do business with them. They're the ones that are going to suffer, aren't they?
They really are. We see big retail, just that have been around for decades in some cases, and we see the bell tolling on those companies, and a lot of it has to do with just, particularly in retail, very razor-thin margins due to very high costs of doing business. And so if you can embrace technology, automate these labor-intensive processes, and get product into the market fast, generate revenue more quickly, that kind of thing, that's really going to make the difference. And so today, I love e-commerce. It's been a passion of mine for many, many years. And it's interesting that we see stats, there's an estimated 12 million online stores worldwide, and yet only maybe a half to $750,000 of them actually generate revenue of more than $1,000 a year. Yeah. That's a huge delta. And that's, my theory is that we see those kind of statistics, which are really just, there's huge opportunity there. But we see that gap, 12 million stores, only, 500,000 of them actually generating significant revenue, because of the labor-intensive process. It's so archaic, that back office processing. So it's, for a smaller retailer on a Shopify or a Magento or a WooCommerce, it's very hard for them to get traction and grow, because you've got to add to your team who just do data entry with spreadsheets, right? So if you can automate that through a tool like Venzee, then that can really make the difference to growth. So we hope to take that number from 500,000 or 750,000 stores with more than $1,000 of revenue a year to a much greater number, by them having a tool like Venzee in their back pocket to automate that process and really grow.
Can you just confirm when you launched the closed beta program and also when you expect to publicly release? Is that?
Sure, yeah. So we're in the final right now. We are, so it utilizes our core competency, our core tech, right, that we already have. So it's a case of with Mesh, an adaptation of the technology we've got. We're adding on the fail-safe side, on those immutable fail-safes that Venzee doesn't rely on, because Venzee writes to traditional databases, and if our customers do it wrong, they can easily, go back and overwrite. So with Mesh, we're adding those fail-safes. We're in the middle of moving to its own architecture, stress and scalability testing, and then from there, in terms of open beta, when it will be there for the world to come in and start to use, that'll be the first half of next year. That's a CTO directive. He likes the first half of next year. You know how those guys are, right? Don't to a date. So I'm like, well, we need something. And he's like, oh yeah, first half of next year. You're good with that.
I love it. So before I let you go, where can anyone listening stay in touch with developments about it, and also ask your team any questions about anything that we've talked about today?
Sure, absolutely. So Venzee.com has live chat, meshblockchain.com. Come by, say hello. We've got a great support and success team. We're a small company. We're around about 40 people across 11 different countries. We're a distributed team. And very friendly and approachable. So, and especially on the developer side, absolutely come by and say hello. There will be a dedicated Slack channel as well on our Slack for Mesh developers that are coming in and want to utilize the framework. But no, absolutely.
Well, a huge thanks for coming on today. Anything that puts another nail in the coffin of Excel is all good by me. I do love what you're doing here. And you've also managed to demystify blockchain, which is another big win as well. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on today. So thank you.
No, I appreciate it very much. They were great questions. Thank you so much. And again, congratulations on Spotify.
With years of experience bringing system connectivity and interoperable data to retail and the supply chain, it's great to see Venzee launching to solve a huge problem for the burgeoning blockchain industry. And if you did feel in the dark about the incoming disruptive force, I hope it all makes a little bit more sense now. But I love Kate's message there. I mean, the spreadsheets businesses use to share that critical information about their products no longer match the requirements of the apps and sales channels used by retailers now. And this creates a labour-intensive process that increases costs for both them and delays revenue for them both. So in short, let's please stop working and relying on 10-year-old spreadsheets just because we've always done it that way. But that was my translation of what she said there. But what did you think of today's show, and indeed the subject of blockchain? I hope it made it a little bit clearer. But if you've still got any questions, please send them in to myself at techblogwriter@outlook.com. And equally, you can tweet me or send me a DM over Twitter at Neil C. Hughes. I must admit, whenever I hear the word blockchain, I'm going to also hear the word database straight afterwards. So I think Kate's done a fantastic job in educating me, and I hope she has you too. But all that's left for me to say is a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.